This is the LEGO Ferrari F1 car, and today I'm going to be drawing it onto this giant piece of paper and walking you through the entire process, which ended up taking just over 33 hours. So I started by building the model, and my heart absolutely sank as soon as I saw how many stickers there were. You see, stickers are actually the hardest thing to draw when it comes to drawing LEGO, and it felt like on every single page of the instruction manual, there was another sticker to add. But hey, I like a challenge, and in total it took me just over 48 minutes to build this model. My next task was to get a photo to draw from, and just like my drawings of the LEGO McLaren F1 car and the LEGO Mercedes F1 car, I went for a nice bird's eye view. I then put a grid onto this photo and then measure out the exact same grid onto my piece of paper, but pressing really lightly here with the pencil because I'll be erasing these lines later on and I don't want them leaving a permanent mark. Right, so now I've done all of that, we can move into doing the sketch. And what I'm doing is just looking at that reference photo and gauging where the outline of the F1 car is crossing each of the lines of the grid, and then coming over to my piece of paper and sketching them in the exact same place. Now, that does sound pretty confusing, so let me break it down a bit more. So what I'm doing is just imagining I'm going through each box one at a time, and I'm just drawing what's in each of the boxes. And the reason the grid method here is so overpowered is because it is breaking up this really complex F1 car into just bite-sized boxes in this case, that I can one at a time work my way through. And especially when doing all the topography for the stickers here, which I mentioned are a pain in the backside to do, it makes them a lot easier because I can just be like, okay, so this word is starting at this distance away from this grid line and is ending at this distance away from this grid line, and then I can just draw it in that exact same way. And the way that I like to approach these LEGO sketches is to first go in and sketch the bigger pieces and then gradually go into the smaller and smaller pieces, ending with the logos and topography. So once I'd finished the sketch, which took me around 4 hours, I could then go in and erase a lot of the grid lines that were furthest away from the car, because I could still use the grids that are closest to the car in order to gauge where shadows and tones need to go a bit later. And then what I could do is go over the entire sketch with something called a kneadable eraser, and I'm using this in a dabbing motion and basically mopping up all the excess graphite that would otherwise mix and muddy the colors that I'd be putting on top. And it also leaves me with a much cleaner sketch because it's getting rid of all of those sketchy, messy lines. So my sketch is now all ready for some color, and the first part of my coloring in process is doing a base layer using the alcohol markers. Now, the exact markers I'm using for this are called Ohuhu Honolulu markers, which is probably the coolest name for any art material ever. And what I'm doing is just going in and jotting in the most obvious areas of tone and color that I can see, ready for the colored pencils a bit later to go on top of, because when colored pencils are going on top of an already colored surface, they'll look a lot more vibrant than they would if they were going straight onto the white surface. Now for this drawing, I was using about 7 different grays, and these were cool grays alongside a couple of lighter blues as well, just to bring the color saturation of those gray pieces up so they don't look really dull in comparison to those brighter red pieces. And for the red pieces, I was using about 4 different reds. I was actually using more pink markers than red markers on this, and also a couple of oranges as well. And I hope you can see here I'm not being overly neat, because at the end of the day I am going to be covering this up with the pencils a bit later, so there's no point making it a work of art just yet. I am making sure to stay within the lines though, and it's important here that you always go a bit lighter than what you think, because it's always easier to darken a lighter area than it is to lighten a darker one. And the way that I approached this marker base was to start by going in with a dark marker and just outlining the outlines of the individual pieces, and then I'll go in with a variety of intermediary and lighter colors in the appropriate areas, just to again jot in those tones and colors. And because the markers are so thick, I basically just didn't even attempt to do any of the topography with them. I'm going to leave that for the colored pencils a bit later. So the marker base took me 5 hours, and I think it looks pretty cool, but obviously it's still quite streaky. The blends between the different colors aren't overly smooth, and yeah, the topography is just non-existent. So I'm going to be coming in with the colored pencils in a second just to crisp everything up and obviously smooth out all those blends between the colors. But before I do this, I just want to take a quick break to work on a little side project. So I'm actually drawing the minifigure from this set, and I made sure to keep his helmet on so he can be either Carlos Sainz or Lewis Hamilton, depending on which one is your favorite driver. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to be making prints of this LEGO Ferrari F1 car drawing, and then I'm going to be giving away prints of this LEGO F1 car driver drawing with every single order. So it's exactly the same premise as what LEGO does with their gift with purchase when you buy from the LEGO store. But it gets better because I'm going to be including this original F1 car driver drawing with a random order. So if you order one of these prints, and there's not going to be very many made, you'll be in with a chance of winning one of my original little drawings. So anyway, I do this drawing in the exact same way as I've just shown you with the F1 car, so doing the sketch with the grids as you've just seen, and then coming in with the markers to add in that base layer. But one thing I haven't shown you yet with the F1 car is doing the pencils, and I'm actually doing this as an experiment piece because it's my first time using Caran d'Ache luminance pencils on a Lego drawing, because previously I used it on a Parrot drawing, and I was really keen to see how these really expensive pencils would deal with drawing Lego. And I've got to say, they were pretty good. Because they're waxed based, it means the leads are really soft, so I'm able to get loads of pigment down and create some really smooth blends between all the different colors, which is obviously what we want when drawing Lego, because everything is really nice and smooth. So I think for a 5-hour drawing, this is actually pretty good. And if you'd like to check out the limited edition prints before they're all gone, they'll be linked down in the description. So it's now time to attack the F1 car with the colored pencil. And I hope by doing that minifigure, you can really see the power that the pencils have to bring a drawing to life. And here I'm also combining those luminance pencils with the normal pencils I use called the Faber-Castell Polychromos. And the reason I'm doing this is because both pencils have their strengths and weaknesses. Now, because the Caran d'Ache luminance are so soft, it means that the tips wear down really quickly, so they're not necessarily ideal for the really detailed areas. However, the Faber-Castell Polychromos, because they're an oil-based pencil, they have a much harder lead, which means they maintain their point for a lot longer, so they're much better suited for the more detailed areas like the topography. Now, because of this hard lead, they obviously don't blend as well because they struggle to get a lot of pigment onto the page, but because those luminous pencils are so soft, they get a lot of pigment onto the page, so they can blend a lot smoother, and the colors are a bit more vibrant because obviously you can get more pigment onto the page, and it's the pigment that has the color. And I do want to point out that I'm not sponsored by either of these pencil brands. So that's enough about the materials that I'm using. I now want to walk you through how I'm using them. So what I'm doing is I'm first coming in with a very dark pencil, in most cases a Polychromos, because obviously they're a lot sharper, and I'm just coming in and crisping up that marker base, because obviously the markers, the tips of them are really quite thick, so I do tend to put pigment slightly out of place. That's just really important that I've definitely got everything correct before I go and spend a lot of time working on it. And the way that I'm working on it with the pencils is I'm firstly coming in with like a reasonably dark pencil and just establishing where all the shadows need to go, just sticking some pigment down to act as lubrication for the pigment that I'm going to be putting on top. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I do my pencil work in lots of layers, and with each layer I'm adding more and more details and gradually pressing harder and harder till I blemish the paper, which is basically the point where you can't put any more pigment down because all of the tooth of the paper is completely full. And just quickly, the paper that I'm using is called Strathmore Bristol paper, and Bristol is not referring to the place in the UK, it's referring to the fact that the paper is made of multiple different layers of paper all layered on top of one another, so it's really nice and thick, so it won't crimple under all this pigment that I'm putting on top of it, and it's also super smooth, like ridiculously smooth. And this allows me to create really solid pencil work so it looks like actual Lego. Now, when I was doing the pencil work on the topography, it was obviously the hardest part of this pencil process, as I've referred to throughout the entire video, and the way that I did it is I came in with a Polychromos pencil because obviously it's nice and hard, and I just outlined the borders of the text, and then I came in with the white Caran d'Ache luminance pencil and add in the main body of the text, because this is a benefit of the luminance pencils, is the fact that the pigment is actually very opaque. So even if I've gone into an area with a pencil that I think is too dark, and then I'm like, I need to make this lighter, I can just go in with a lighter pencil and it will lighten it up. And something funny I found throughout this entire process is obviously the car is very red, but I actually used way more pink than I did red pencils. And the very last thing that I did was I went and added a shadow underneath the car to really help ground it on the page, and then erased the remaining grid lines to leave me with a nice, clean, finished drawing. So here you go, my drawing of the LEGO Ferrari F1 car. It took 33 hours to complete this, and if you'd like a limited edition print of this drawing, there'll be links down in the description, and I'll see you in the next video, which will appear on screen right over here.